Greetings, I'm Dr. Al Freeman, Director of LCMS School Ministry, and it's a joy today to have with us Reverend Dr. Roosevelt Gray, who is the Director of LCMS Black Ministry. Roosevelt, thank you for joining us today and to talk with our LCMS schools about LCMS Black Ministry. So if you would tell us about Black Ministry, all the great projects and undertakings, and how it impacts our LCMS schools as well.
Thank you very much, my brother, for inviting me to share LCMS Black Ministry with school ministry. As you know, LCMS Black Ministry really started out as school ministry in Black rural areas. The first congregation was a congregation in Little Rock, Arkansas that started with Sunday school, a day school, then a congregation.
You always tell me about the great history of the LCMS and Black ministry and going back to 1877.
Amen. Well, the 1877 Church Planting Initiative from Senate, the Synodical Conference, and also from the LCMS with the Synodical Conference started in Little Rock, Arkansas. Frederick Dozier then left there and he went down 1877 in Little Rock, Arkansas. As I said, started with the day school, a Sunday school, day school congregation. St. Paul's Lutheran Church was the first congregation. St. Paul Lutheran School started before St. Paul Lutheran Church. And then from there, Dozier went south to New Orleans and he started Mount Zion Lutheran School. That became Mount Zion Lutheran Church, and St. Paul Lutheran School that became St. Paul's Lutheran Church. So church planting really was connected with school ministry wherever they went in the South, because as many people may or may not know, that during that time in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were hardly any public schools in rural Black communities. If they did, they put one school in a county and you had to make your way to that school. So the uniqueness of the Lutherans then, apart from the other church bodies that went south, the Lutherans then would start with a Sunday school and start with a day school and start with a church that they had worship every Sunday morning, where most of the other churches that went south started worship once a month because they were circuit riders. But the Lutherans went in and they did this unique thing of having a school, a day school, and then having worship service every Sunday. And the pastor and his wife usually were the educators there, and they taught word and sacrament ministry. They shared word and sacrament ministry and taught Christian education. Niels Bakke was the instrumental person in Alabama to start that ministry. But the ministry in New Orleans was started by Dozier. And then Bakke came a little later in New Orleans, and then Bakke left and went over to North Carolina, and eventually he came down to Alabama. But after the first school in Little Rock, Arkansas, the second school, as I said, was Mount Zion, then St. Paul's. And then the New Orleans field, or the Louisiana field, was one of the largest of the fields. And there were about 9 or 10 churches with schools in Louisiana. And that's the way they used to do it. They connect with the community. They start Sunday school. They create a day school, and a congregation grew out of the day school.
Really, that's who we are as Lutherans, right? I mean, that's Lutheran schools of today. It's going into the community. It's building relationships. It's having the Christ-centered foundation. It's being in the Word and bringing the Word at all times. But it's, as we have for the theme for this year for our Lutheran schools, go and make disciples. You know, we're not studying back, we're going to the community, and you have to build the relationships, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And it sounds like that's exactly what was happening in 1877 and beyond, and still, that's who we are and what we do today.
Amen. Well, after the New Orleans and Louisiana field, the North Carolina field was the second largest field. There were probably 26 or 27 churches in North Carolina. Most of them had schools connected to them. We had the seminary down in North Carolina in Greensboro, and that school closed down in 1861. We started the Emmanuel Lutheran School and Seminary down there for African Americans in that area. Grace Lutheran Church started that way out of a school, and they felt the need of starting education, undergraduate education in the seminary. So we had that going in North Carolina. And then other schools started throughout the southeast region and things like that, and then basically the most productive field was on the Alabama, the Southern District, where you had even today in Black ministry. Unfortunately, we only have one school left, but on that field there are over 20 nearly 30 congregations that are in Black ministry. Even apart from the congregation that with Black ministry, the predominantly Black congregations, nearly 30 of those churches. And just about all of those churches had school starts before the congregation started, or they started simultaneously, the school and the congregation.
Talk to us a little bit about Rosa Young and the Rosa Young Academies.
Rosa Young was probably one of the greatest missionary in the LCMS. Rosa started out as the AME. Her father was an AME, African Methodist Episcopal circuit rider in the Black Belt of Alabama. That is Rosebud, Camden, Selma, all of those little rural areas there. And what they would do, the AME church body planted all of these rural churches in the South and put a circuit rider there. And the circuit rider pastor would go to these churches once a month and preach. I mean, he probably had 13 or 14 little small churches there. And so he would go in once a month and preach at different churches. And so all during the month, he would go to different churches and different Sundays and preach. And Rosa was the daughter of this circuit rider, Mr. Young, Pastor Young. And Rosa was praying that if God would give her a formal education, let her get a college education, then she would come back to the rural South and she would teach kids there. And so she started Rosebud Literary and Industrial Academy in the little place called Rosebud. And then the boll weevil came through and just devastated the crops down south. And basically the families didn't have any money to pay for the education. And instead of closing her school, Rosa wrote to Booker T. Washington, who was the president of Tuskegee Institute, and asked him if he knew of any church bodies up north who could come and help her. And he gave her the name of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. He said, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is doing more to educate Blacks in the South than any other church body. And Rosa wrote a letter to Christopher Drews, who was the executive for church planting and mission executive. And he sent Niels Bakke down, and Niels came down, talked to Rosa, saw her school, came back and told him, let's put the school in the Missouri Synod, catechize Rosa Young. She'll be the educator, I'll be the pastor, and we'll get started. And that was Christ Lutheran Church and School that came out of Rosebud Christian School and Industrial Academy. And the rest is history. Rosa and Pastor Bakke with other missionaries started 35 congregations and 30 schools.
Wow.
And out of that church planting, you have more Black pastors who came into the Lutheran Church. If you go to Black Ministry website, you'll see a post on there with those 4 Black pastors who spent 50 years in ministry, Dr. Marshall, Dr. Brown, and Dr. Warren Davis. All 4 of them graduated from Springfield, but they were the 73 grads. They were all Rosa Young students.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just looking at that on the Facebook page, as a matter of fact. Yesterday, it came up when I was reading that story, and just amazing history. And again, you can go to Black Ministry, LCMS Black Ministry website. We'll have that up as part of this Facebook post. And also, we'll have information about directing you to Rosa Young and Rosa Young's story and the video that's there. I highly encourage people to watch it. I encourage our schools to show it. I mean, just a tremendous lesson opportunity there as well. And we are still working on Rosa Young Academies, right? Roosevelt, we were just talking before about some Rosa Young Academy opportunities and schools out there, school plants that are Rosa Young schools.
In our 2016 synodical convention, after we had done the Rosa Young documentary, we passed a resolution there to start some new Rosa J. Young academies in places where we used to have school, and start some new schools in places where we don't have a presence. And hopefully out of that school presence then would create a church and create new mission workers, and also create new pastors and new and new educators out of those church planted endeavors.
What a blessing our Lutheran schools are. You said it before, Roosevelt. We know how to do schools. We know how to do them well. And we know how to do schools because, as you mentioned before too, it's about outreach. It's about sharing the gospel message. We do so as people who need the gospel message. We give thanks for your work, Roosevelt. We give thanks for LCMS Black Ministry. We encourage all of you that are watching this, go to the LCMS Black Ministry website, look at all the resources, especially the Rosa Young Academy and video and all the other wonderful resources. What a blessing you are, Roosevelt, and thank you for your ministry and for your work each and every day. Blessings to you.
Thank you, brother. God bless you. Appreciate you.
Hey everybody, Will from School Ministry here, and if you enjoyed that video, then I recommend that you maybe check out these videos here, because they're pretty awesome. And if you're new to the channel, maybe hit this button over here to subscribe so you can always get our latest content. And as always, thanks for watching.